There we are, sweeping in from overhead into the feature match area, Pro Tour Dragons Maze, San Diego, California, where it is just after 4:45 local time, and we have the matchup of giants, Nassif, Mihara, and we see Land coming out.
Yeah, it's kind of you're a testament to being kind of old school, I think, if you just bust out the old Ravnica dual lands. You're just like, look, man, we've been to this rodeo before.
Gate Creeper Vine from Gabriel Nassif, and he's looking at his hand to see what he wants. We see there on the top that Sphinx's Revelation for Gabe. We saw him briefly at the end of last round, savaging a mana short Patrick Chapin.
Yeah.
And we'll get to see a lot more of his deck in this round. He just goes and gets an island.
Gate Creeper Vine's subtly really powerful in this matchup. It's a creature to sacrifice to far and away the Edict effect that comes out of a lot of these Esper control decks. Also makes the Voice of Resurgence tokens a little bit more potent, which are exceedingly relevant in this match because both players have counter magic and are trying to do things on one another's turns. So and of course the main effect of just getting more lands, which,
right.
you know, this match is about land drop.
Sin Collector for Makihito Mihara. And he's going to look at Sphinx's Revelation. He's going to look at Supreme Verdict. He looks like he's pretty clearly decided to take the Sphinx's Revelation. And then he's just going to write down the rest of the cards that are in Nassif's hand.
Yeah, and I mean, that is exactly one of the reasons that especially some of the European teams are telling me they're playing Esper, is to be able to main deck Sin Collector and win the Sphinx's Revelation War in the mirror match. One thing Collector does not stop, and that Gate Creeper Vine really helps with, is, of course, Jace. Our Architect of Thought, I believe, is this current iteration of Jace. So, you know, can't really deal with that card, but certainly when you have access to Sphinx's Revelation, your opponent does not. That is quite the advantage in a control mirror.
So we see Gabe Nassif play another Gate Creeper Vine and fetch a Plains out of his deck. He plays Breeding Pool into play tapped. And Mihara comes across for 2 with the Sin Collector. And there we see Jace.
And getting Jace onto the battlefield early is obviously very important in a match like this. Immediately using the middle ability, which of course prevents Nassif from casting his own Jace and drawing his own set of cards. So it's kind of like opposition in chess, but a really, really important edge to have here, especially when you have a creature on the battlefield and your opponent does not.
So we see 2 lands and a Renounce the Guilds for Makihito Mihara. And Gabe Nassif is taking a good look. Take the spell, take the 2 lands. I think the 2 lands is the call there. Yep, there he goes.
And that is a pretty big blowout, actually, for Mihara, because what Gab doesn't know is that Mihara has 1 Blood Baron of Visculpa already in his hand. So Nassif sort of unwillingly just gave Mihara the mana he needs to cast it.
And there we see Nassif playing a Jace of his own to get rid of the existing Jace. Sin Collector is going to come in for 2 more, dropping Nassif down to 14.
Yeah, and you don't get those cards when you're Nassif by casting that Jace, but at least you prevent Mihara from getting even more cards with that Jace. So, you know, better to do that than to do nothing at all.
Josh Utter-Layton has taken game 1 already from Reed Duke in that matchup.
Which I guess if the matchup ends this quickly, you can kind of assume, given that Josh is playing Boros aggro and Reed is playing this Bant deck.
All right, so Mihara gets in with both the Jace.
All right, sorry, he's attacking, I think, with Precinct Captain
and the Precinct Captain.
Yeah, the Sin Collector, the Precinct Captain. Yeah.
What did I say?
I
Jace?
thought you said the Jace. Yeah, I do like the idea of Jace putting on the hood and deciding, okay, it's time to brawl, boys.
The Sin Collector and the Precinct Captain. Sorry about that, folks.
So Nassif blocking, obviously, he's prepping a Supreme Verdict, decides, okay, look, I might as well gain some card advantage. It's time for my Gate Creeper Vines to bite the dust, save myself some damage. Or, I guess that is no need to pull the trigger just yet.
Yeah, he's going to take a few more,
Yeah.
and create a soldier token.
He's got a revelation in his hand that he might be trying to set up right now. Of course, allows Mihara to retaliate right away with his own revelation for 3. But I think the main issue is that, yeah, I mean, no need to Wrath right away. Nassif just trying to play some more lands and draw out the game a little bit. Don't want to just sort of throw a revelation into a ton of untapped mana from your opponent. Nassif waiting until he has 4 to cast Supreme Verdict so as to represent cancel mana or you know, render silent mana or anything you could possibly cast.
Okay, there's the end of turn. Sphinx's Revelation out of Mihara for 4. Gabe gonna give it some thought. So
Yeah.
we find that Ken Yukihiro has won game 1 on the back table against Yamaguchi.
I was saying he might even be representing Render Silent. He's not actually doing that, only has 2 white sources. But you know he's representing something. He can't, you know, cast the Voice of Resurgence, so he's
okay, so
stranded there.
He leaves the mana on tap to represent the spell, the cancel or the Render Silent.
Probably most likely the Syncopate, which he has 2.
Or the Syncopate. So when Mihara taps out to play that Sphinx's Revelation, what is Gabe thinking about in that? I mean, he certainly if he's got a counterspell, he's just going to play it.
Yeah, I mean, I think what Gabe's thinking about is, Lord, I hope my opponent doesn't have Sphinx's Revelation. You know, you don't get 4 mana on tap to represent Plasm Capture. He didn't Wrath the turn before, you know, which would have allowed him to follow up with Voice of Resurgence, but there was no real need to pull the trigger. You kind of want to cast your Wrath to draw out Blood Baron or some finisher like that, which allows you to hit it with the second Wrath.
And speaking of the Blood Baron, there it is from Makihito Mihara. And that is quickly going to get him into the position where the Blood Baron is huge. Mihara is already at 22 from the Sphinx's Revelation. Blood Baron's going to get in. I mean, he's going to get in for 2 hits, and Mihara's going to be over 30.
Yeah, and Nassif burning a Verdict on it. You can clearly see Nassif, which he had a second white source to be able to cast Voice of Resurgence, just hasn't had a window to do that at all. And Mihara just hand loaded up full of goodies. He's got Azorius Charms he can cycle. He's got a Verdict of his own, and most importantly, a Jace Architect of Thought with which to draw even more cards, most likely setting up one of his 2 copies of Aetherling as the game goes longer and longer.
Great.
3 cards for Gabe Nassif, 7 for Mihara. There's Guildgate of the Azorius kind, and just past the turn.
And keeping up mana to cycle both of his Azorius Charms if necessary. Also leaving up, most importantly, Sphinx's Revelation mana, which it looks like he has buried sort of in the center of his... Oh, no, sorry, that is a Detention Sphere. So I think the plan is just to cycle some of those Azorius Charms.
Yeah, cycling Azorius Charms.
And Nassif, we see him not casting Voice of Resurgence. Could be any number of reasons for that. Wants to represent the threat of being able to cast a big Sphinx's Revelation of his own, preventing Mihara from tapping too low. Also wants to represent Plasm Capture, the ability to hold up you know, a meaningful amount of mana. But Nassif, pretty far behind right now, doesn't want to sort of show his hand by committing too much to the board and you know, just allowing Mihara to beat him with the cards he already has in his hand.
We see Gabe draws a Jace Architect of Thought. Here's a good look at his hand. The Jace, the Voice of Resurgence, the Detention Sphere, and a Breeding Pool.
So,
I mean, at some point, you have to run the Voice of Resurgence out there to lay a little pressure on Mihara.
Well, I will certainly be the first to admit to not having tested this matchup the hundreds of times that Nassif has. So you know, my commentary all has to be sort of declared with an asterisk. I would guess that if you're not willing to cast Voice of Resurgence, you wouldn't be willing to cast Jace either. But as it looks like Nassif prepares his mana, that may not in fact be the case.
Oh, what's his argument for just firing both out there? And that's
that
still
is also
leave
not
him,
a bad argument.
He's going to leave him with 3 mana to represent Cancel or Render Silent.
So, okay, I think now he's still leaving, leaving up cancel mana. Also may just not be representing as much right now, just saying like, okay, like now is the time for me to cast some threats. I want to get Voice of Resurgence on the table, so as if you're going to counter my Jace, I at least get a creature or something.
Okay, so we're waiting with the Jace Architect Thought on the stack. Mihara gives it thumbs up.
-2.
And Gabe will go to the -2. There's land, land, land. Not necessarily what you want to see, but hey, at least you're not dead drawing lands the next 3 turns.
Yeah, you see the split of the 2 dual lands there versus the single land. That at least means that, okay, if you take the 2 cards, you're just going to have to pay some life if you want the mana right away, giving Nassif a meaningful choice since color not actually the biggest issue right now.
Right. Gabe just goes back to Mihara, who has drawn a Hallowed Fountain, looks like. Here we see 2 Supreme Verdicts, a 4th Azorius Charm.
We see a Syncopate there, too, if we want to take a look at his hands. So, I mean, Mihara can do a lot of things right now, but no terribly pressing need to do a whole lot, but he's about to just get the Jace off the table and potentially play a Jace
Cast on one of his own, yeah.
Another option is, of course, just to leave up tremendous amounts of Syncopate mana to stop anything from happening, but now is a great window to resolve Jace.
He's going to -2 as well. No, he's going to +1 it.
I think you want to +1 it. If you -2 it, you're going to get one sort of mini factor fiction out of it. You're going to run right into your opponent's Voice of Resurgence. As is right now, you're sort of containing Voice by only letting it attack for 1 a turn. You're letting it keep parity with Jace. And more importantly, what you can do is untap now with all of your mana. Jace still at 4 loyalty. And if you're going to cast it, if you're going to use its card drawing ability, you could...
there is a Detention Sphere.
At least protect it. But the downside of not getting cards, of course, you might run into a Detention Sphere and have nothing to show for it.
Okay, Voice of Resurgence goes in, drops Mihara to 20. We see Gabe Nassif still at 10. This is game 1, round 14 action, Pro Tour, Dragon's Maze in San Diego.
Mihara falling all the way down to 20, and really, despite all the card advantage he gained, sort of not a whole lot of action.
Yeah, he's had no pressure to lay on.
We see just sort of Supreme Verdicts and lands from both these players. The Voice of Resurgence making Mihara's Syncopate look a little bit awkward, but essentially right now both players are just trying to draw into business spells.
Gabe Nassif has drawn Loxodon Smiter.
And kind of a meaningful question for Nassif right now. You sort of want to play that Smiter to put a 3-turn clock on Mihara. On the other hand, if you do that, you justify his ability to burn a Supreme Verdict. You kind of have to assume that he has a Supreme Verdict after all these cards and all these turns. So Nassif just electing to nickel and dime him down from 18 life. The downside of this being the second your opponent Sphinx's Revelation, these 2 points of damage increments just not going to add up to a whole lot. All right. Thrilling games of Drago we're looking at here.
When's the Psychotog come out?
We see a far and away right now. Theoretically, you can burn a Supreme Verdict and an Edict to get rid of that voice, but you're just not too excited to do that.
David Sharpman is taking game 1 from Rob Castellan on one of the back tables. This looks like it's going to end up as a long match, so we may not get to see any of those back table matches, and we see...
In set runs? Sorry? In set runs? This time? No, I didn't play land. Not land? No land.
Yes. So we see Aetherling, and looks like it's going to get syncopated for... Let me count how many lands you have. Gabe has 6 untapped.
And I think Mihara confirming that Gabe didn't, tap 7, announce Aetherling, and have mana floating.
Right.
Which, tricky thing you can do.
Okay, there's Voice of Resurgence token, and he says go.
And Gabe, again, wisely keeping that Smiter in his hand, pretty much assuming Mihara will have to cast an Instance sooner or later. You definitely want that Aetherling to resolve, but, you'll take the value that your voice gives you if you have to.
Mihara plays the Supreme Verdict, which nets Gabe the Elemental, which, of course, is 1/1 at the moment.
And the issue, of course, for Mihara, these tokens are not going to kill him. He's got Supreme Verdict far and away still left in his hand, but they're just kind of trying to engage in a resource battle right here.
Right. So Gabe plays the locks on Smiter before combat. That pumps up the elemental to 2/2, and will take Makihito Mihara down to 12.
So again, Mihara can use another Supreme Verdict, but what Nassif's essentially accomplished is making him trade Supreme Verdicts 1-for-1 with Nassif's threats. Because he's used 2 Supreme Verdicts to deal with a Smiter and a Voice.
And Gabe Nassif off the top draws Voice of Resurgence and plays it. And there's a Blood Baron of Vizkopa, which kind of trumps the Voice of Resurgence.
You see Gabe just letting that resolve. That he's got a Plasm Capture in his hand, but he's looking at his Supreme Verdicts. He's basically saying, I can Verdict, still have a token on the table, and I need to save my Plasm Capture for something like an Aethering, because with this many mana, an Aetherling from Mihara's side of the board is game over for Nassif.
Bounce.
Okay. So he's going to play Far and Away. He's going to make Gabe sack a token. He's going to bounce his Blood Baron.
Cards.
Then.
So we see the Supreme Verdict still resolving, leaving an elemental on the board.
Shouldn't it kill the elemental?
No, I mean, Voice of Resurgence dies, which
because
gives
the
him an
instant,
element.
right.
Exactly. So we see why Mihara is being so disciplined, obviously, with those Fars in a way. You know, he could have used it as an Edict earlier to save himself some damage, but far more valuable to protect one of his threats. And we see Nassif drain it basically just because he has to.
Right.
Now, right now, we're in the Wild West.
Yep. Oh, well, I think Mihara has come up with a 6-shooter.
Wow, and there is the Aetherling, and that is exactly what Nassif did not want to see this turn. Big top decks for Mihara.
Josh Utter-Layton has taken down his match with Reed Duke to win 2-0 and advance his chances for making top 8 and getting into the Player of the Year race.
And that Syncopate just taunting Nassif right now, exactly the turn right after he needs it. There may be an argument that you could make for not countering the Blood Baron and hoping you draw an answer to it, but you burn through enough Supreme Verdicts, that's not likely to happen. And just very fortunate draws from Mihara right here, and this Aetherling very likely to take down this game.
Well, and just in 2 turns.
Yeah, exactly.
Unblockable. Pump him 4 times. He's at 2.
Go ahead.
Go ahead, he says. He's kept Counterspell. So what is Gabe Nassif going to try? JSEC Architect of Thought.
Okay.
Yes, it resolves, Mihara says.
We've got a Psychic Strike in Mihara's hand, so he can counter any of the non-uncounterable spells Nassif comes up with. Revelation is what he needed here to try and stay alive, I think, but...
It's over. So, Makihito Mihara takes game 1 away from Gabriel Nassif.
And yeah, we saw the players in a top deck war, but Mihara gained so much advantage early on. You kind of have to expect his top decks to be a little bit better than Nassif's.
It's not too late to choose your guild and join the race. Declare your allegiance on planeswalkerpoints.com to earn special badges and achievements. Remember, the last day to join a guild is May 30th. Once again, you know, we're talking about the guilds, the only correct guild to join being the Orzhov Syndicate.
Of course. I believe that you would say that as a member of the aforementioned, syndicate?
Syndicate. It's understanding what is just and right and having the courage to make it happen.
Oh, okay, I see. Courage.
Courage.
Does syndicate have a negative connotation?
No. And we have a team of lawyers that will prove otherwise, and you may be subject to libel right here and now.
I'll make sure to pay attention for when and if that happens.
Here comes Supreme Verdict up on your screen. You'll see it's uncounterable. That's the big thing, especially in this control and control matchup, right?
Yeah, so what the card originally did is it let you unsummon something of yours and then Wrath. So basically you get to say, like, I would rather keep my threat around and then blow everything up. Eventually, we made an uncounterable cycle and return to Ravnica as sort of a nod to the Legacy players, and also as some weapons against the Rug Delver deck that was doing really well in Legacy and potentially good in Modern. But the card, really good. I mean, really powerful card. It's cost exactly the same as Day of Judgment, which is a constructed staple. For the low price of blue mana, you get to make it uncounterable, which very relevant in Magic because aggro control decks, usually the way that you threaten regular good old control decks, because you can play a clock and then just counter all their removal. You can't do that against Supreme Verdict.
So let's go back to when it was originally, it wasn't uncounterable. Did you make it uncounterable because of the uncounterable cycle, or because you weren't grooving on how the bounce thing was going?
The bounce thing was pretty cool. It was, neat. It was enjoyable. But we were pretty big on this uncounterable cycle. So as I recall, I think that was the reason that this wound up this way.
As you recall.
As I recall. My memory not perfect, as my girlfriend will be the first to tell you.
Okay, so we're going to sweep back down over the top. There's Gabe Nassif on the left. There is Mihara on the right. And what kind of sideboard action are we going to see out of these two players, Zach?
The first thing I'm looking at is actually this Debtor's Pulpit out of Mihara's board. I think it's a really sweet answer to Aetherling. They can flicker it out. It's not going to kill it. You just tap that at the beginning of combat. You're not going to get hit by an Aetherling. I think that's pretty innovative. I like it a lot. We can see Obsidian Ghost Council also dodges all these Supreme Verdicts. We've got an additional Blood Baron, 2 Sin Collectors. I have to expect that he's bringing in 2 Nightveil Spectre, 2 Dispel, 2 Psychic Strike, 2 Sin Collector, and the Pulpit for probably some of these creatures that just bite the dust to Wrath effects and get trumped by Nassif's Smiters.
Okay, that's 9 cards, so there's a significant shift in his deck.
Yeah, it is. I mean, you just have a lot of cards that are not all that exciting, though. You've got, like, Supreme Verdict, which is okay, but you may not need all 3 of them. Far and Away does some work, but you're not thrilled by it. The big thing I'm not a big fan of are the 4 Precinct Captains out of the board. I mean, they're not bad in an Esper fight, but they are not the awesomest against your opponent who has Advent of the Worm, who has Loxodon Smiter. It's just going to be hard to force it through, I think.
So on Nassif's side?
You've got 2 copies of Dispel. Again, they're made for this matchup. I think you want Cancel because you're going to be fighting a lot of counterspell fights. That is how you beat Aetherling out of the board. And I like Maze's End, just allows you access to more mana, ensure you don't miss your land drops. Syncopate, again, it's a counterspell, although not necessarily that awesome. It's hard to use at instant speed, but with you bringing in all these counter magic, pieces of counter magic, I have to imagine that you want your Advent of the Worm in order to present threats at instant speed.
Yeah, I mean, Advent of the Worm makes a 5/5, so that's 4 hits and we're done. Especially if you're maybe moving away from one of your Supreme Verdicts.
Right.
It presents a more significant threat.
Totally. So in terms of what Nassif boards out, I mean, it's okay. Looks like we're about
live.
To start
we're
actually
ready to
playing.
go.
So I guess we'll see what he boarded out as we watch this match.
Nope.
Okay. Well, maybe we won't.
Looks like Mihara is going to go to 6.
Which again, you can't be too disappointed by it if you're Nassif. I mean, a matchup like this, literally every single card matters. I have to think if you're Nassif, you don't need the full 4 Supreme Verdict and Detention Sphere. If you know about something like Nightveil Spectre, I think you want to make sure you have spot removal. Azorius Charm helps you a little bit with your mana base, but not amazingly exciting right now. You definitely want Revelation. Angel of Serenity, a decent late-game trump, but not going to be hitting the cards that matter in this matchup, which I think are Aetherling, and not going to deal with Blood Baron either. So I think you can bring out Angel of Serenity, and I'm not confident how many. Again, we talked about verdicts. I don't know that you need all 4 Smiters either, although it's nice that card gets in early under counter magic and applies pressure. Kind of depends on how much removal you think Mihara is going to have in after board.
So, I mean, this is very much a game of cat and mouse here between these two, figuring out who's going to side out what or what they're going to side in. I mean, even if they had access to each other's deck list, they might have to spend some thought on what they're what their opponent may bring in and out.
Right. I mean, if you think your opponent's going to have 4 Supreme Verdicts in or something, you probably don't need all of those Loxodon and Smiters. Well, then again, they may be fine because they draw a removal spell. I mean, actually, the more I think about it, the better Smiter seems. But yeah, I mean, like, if you know your opponent's going to have Nightveil Spectre, you want spot removal. If he's not going to do anything like that and is going to kill you with Aetherlings, you don't want to worry about all that.
Right. Okay, Makihito Mihara keeps on 6, and Gabe Nassif plays turn 2, Voice of Resurgence.
And that's exactly what you want to be doing on the second turn. If you're Nassif, you're putting pressure on your opponent. You're not letting him play his game on your turn. And you're really making good use of your mana. A lot of control decks can't do that much in the early game, so you might as well do something proactive on your second turn.
And then just represent that turn 3 counterspell, which a Sin Collector is going to eat. And the tempo advantage goes to Nassif.
That exchange there sort of reminded me of when you sort of duress away your opponent's mana leaks. It's like, well, that mana leak was probably going to get duressed anyway.
Right. All right, there's Jace from Gabe Nassif. So we see Cancel, Gate Creeper Vine, and Supreme Verdict. The Cancel goes into its own pile. We'll mention, while Gabe makes this decision, he does have Maze's End. He may have brought it in, but he doesn't have 10 different guild gifts.
Right, yeah, this is a Maze's End for value to gain.
It's just thawing glaciers.
Right, yeah, merely thawing glaciers. Going to put you up a couple of cards, maybe fix your mana, but not really going to just go the distance for you.
Keeps the 2, and expensive thawing glaciers.
Yeah, right. Okay, so he keeps 2 cards. He actually needed that Gate Creeper Vine, it looks like, because he doesn't have a whole lot of mana left over. Mihara, with Obsidian Revelation in his hand, got a good late game going on. Far and away also can protect his cards and threaten some of Nassif's creatures, but not looking too awesome from this exact board position.
And we have a result that Kenyuki Heroes beat Yamaguchi on the back table 2-1.
So yeah, the Ghost Council in this matchup, really good for a lot of the same reasons Aetherling is. You just can't interact with it on the main phase. And it comes down a little bit earlier. It's just more must-counter threats for Nassif, and we're going to see if Nassif can, in fact, do that. Wow, you see him looking at Plasm Capture. He put that Temple Garden into play tapped, could have paid 2 life, had 4 mana, but he cannot cast Plasm Capture on Ghost Council.
Oh, so that may be a considerable misstep from Gabe Nassif. Obsidat's going to come in, drain him for 2, and then blink out to come back next turn.
Right, so we do see an Advent of the Worm, which in some universes can, in fact, deal with Obsidat, but you have to expect if you're in Nassif, you'd much rather have just resolved Plasm Capture right there. I mean, Mihara probably wouldn't have cast his Ghost Council into it as boldly as he did.
Sure.
But
no, he didn't have it up, yeah.
Yeah, right, exactly.
So we see the split on the Mini-Thoth, keeps the Hallowed Fountain and the Smiter, sends the Sphinx's Revelation to the bottom, which of course is going to get shuffled in eventually when shuffled around when he plays that Gate Creeper Vine.
Right. There's a lot of cards in Nassif's hand right now. A lot he can work with it. Now reading Obsidat, how on earth am I going to deal with this card?
Right.
You have to expect the answer is just Advent. Hope it doesn't bite any kind of dust.
Well, I mean, the thing is, Mihara doesn't have to attack with it.
Oh yeah, no, that's true too.
Just drain you again, just drain you again, just drain you again, and his removal, which is effectively Supreme Verdict, just not going to take care of Obsidat.
No, that's a good point too. And yeah, Nassif can't just keep 4 mana open all the time. So yeah, I mean, if Mihara doesn't attack, it's quite problematic for Nassif. Nassif trying to figure out his mana works, a little bit constrained on green, which makes it awkward to cast that Gatekeeper Vine. Also needs double green for Advent of the Worm, so even though he has 6 lands out here, kind of facing a few meaningful mana problems. We haven't seen Nassif attack with that voice yet. He also might just be thinking about blocking with that and getting a bigger creature to attack back on Mihara, using his Gatekeeper Vines to pump up the Keldon Warlord elemental token.
Yeah, the problem for Nassif is that when Obsidat comes back in, it's draining him for 2, it's also giving Mihara 2 life.
Right. We see Nassif main facing the Advent of the Worm token. Of course, he doesn't know what Mihara's hand is. He doesn't know Mihara doesn't have a counter spell. That allows the Worm to resolve, which is important, but it also telegraphs it for Mihara. So, you know, if Mihara was going to attack with Ghost Council, and of course it's not clear that he would, or Obsidat, he certainly is not going to right now.
Right. So, Mihara goes to 18, Nassif goes to 12
Yeah.
on the triggered ability of Obsidat.
And another land for Mihara right here. As a group of lands, has the Sphinx's Revelation. Can't really resolve a massive Sphinx's Revelation in this window, but can certainly cast a
Far and away.
A fused Far and Away. Very, very good Far and Away right here, especially since that's not one of the classically best cards in this matchup. You have to be excited to be getting that kind of value out of it.
Right. Yeah, that was kind of beating, and that means Obsidat can get in, takes Nassif down to 7, which is going to be lethal next turn.
Yeah, I think Nassif was trying to play around counter magic there, but you saw when that Far and Away happened, Nassif kind of hung his head. He's like, yeah, you know, who knows whether he was thinking about it or not, but that was a quite powerful play from Mihara. Nassif grip full of cards, but not too many of them that'll get him out of this situation. Worth bearing in mind, though, he can chump with Gatekeeper Vine for at least several turns. He does have Jace that, you know, can allow him access to several more cards.
Well, if he can't deal with Obsidat, he's got 4 turns.
Right.
Because Obsidat will drain him for 2 each time it comes in.
Exactly. So, I mean, the thing you want to do, I think, if you're Nassif right here, is try and just set up a window where you can resolve a meaningfully large Sphinx's Revelation. There aren't that many good ways for you to kill that Obsidat now that it's on the table, and now that you don't have an Advent of the Word token to deal with it. So I think you just have to kind of put threats on the board, set up a turn where you can cast Sphinx's Revelation long enough to keep you alive, or at least make Ghost Council have to attack, and try and chain that into another Revelation later at a rate where 2 a turn is just not going to kill you.
Right. So we see Gabe Nassif plays the Voices of Resurgence and the Loxodon Smiter, which will keep Mihara from attacking, but it's still come back into the battlefield and drain them for 2.
Yeah, and we see Mihara seize this opportunity to cast his own Sphinx's Revelation for 4. No cards in hand before he gets or no spells in hand. He has 4 lands, but 4, I think, big hits off that Revelation. And now it's going to be a lot harder for Nassif to do what he needs to do to win this game.
Well, especially since Mihara is now at 24.
Right.
I mean, Gabe is going to come in for 5 here, or 6 here, but that's, you know, that's not all that's significant when he's under the gun of Obsidat.
Yeah, I mean, and that Plasm Capture just not really doing a whole lot this match. Gabe being constrained on green mana is a pretty huge beating for him right here. He's now using Jace to say, okay, what can I dig for right now to get me out of this? We're seeing Voice or 2 lands for Nassif, and Nassif decides to take the Voice. So if you're Nassif right now, I almost think you just cast Revelation while you know that you can resolve it. I mean, that gives you 2 more turns at least, allows you to crack in for 6.
For 4.
Yeah.
And you're right. That brings him back up to 9, draws him 4 cards. So that definitely changes the Obsidat Ghost Council math.
Yes.
It gives him 5 turns from now, assuming he doesn't gain more life.
Well, yeah, and assuming you don't take more damage. I mean, you want to be attacking with your creatures to cement the limited advantage that you have over Mihara, which is that at the very least, your board is comparable, if not better. If you leave those creatures back, you know, yeah, you can't crack in with Ghost Council, but, you know, he's the one winning the damage race at that point. And but on the other end, if you attack, you open yourself up to any number of Mihara's removal spells. In general, just a really bad situation for Nassif right here. It's kind of hard to sugarcoat it.
On the back tables, Rob Castellan has evened his match with David Sharkman. They are standing at 1-1. Josh Layton has beaten Reed Duke, sending him to his 4th loss.
And Nassif right now just trying to decide what on earth to discard. I mean, he's got an absolutely loaded hand. We see 8 spells, double caps, so 3 cards
7.
or 4 cards even that may counter stuff. Gatekeeper Vine, you know, really difficult decisions for Nassif, kind of having to plot out the game several turns in advance now just to see when will I be able to make use of all of these cards, if at all.
We're in round 14 here, which means this is the 10-3 bracket. So a 4th loss here probably knocks one of these guys out of contention for top 8.
Right. 16 rounds total in a Pro Tour level event. And if I'm Mihara here, I have to start saying, okay, you need to make a decision.
Yeah.
And, yeah, he does. Well, at least he makes one of the many decisions he has to make in this discard step.
Old-timey pros can be a little more deliberate than these young guys.
Hey, man, I worked with Dave Humphreys for nearly 3 years. I know a thing or two about deliberate old-timey play.
Yeah.
Dave, one of my favorite all-time Magic players and general human beings.
One of the great all-time Magic players. And in untimed rounds, I think he was just better.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I think in timed rounds, he was arguably just better. Now, Mihara here, we've been paying a lot of attention to Gab's hand, but Mihara by no means out of gas on his side of the board.
Yeah, he's got another far and away right there.
We see a Night Veil Spectre setting up a threat in the air and also threatening to use Gab's cards against him. And Mihara very content right now to just play Ghost Council games and say, all right, I've got a counterspell in my hand. I have an Edict. Yeah, you've got a Voice of Resurgence. That's nice. I don't really care about it. You're not going to be able to attack me for a whole lot, or I'm just going to kill you on my next attack. So once again, just a huge amount of options for Nassif.
Here comes the Smiter. Takes Mihara down to 22.
All the way down to 22 life points.
There's another Smiter in Gabe's hand.
That's the other thing you don't know if you're Nassif is like, I mean, as we were talking about, like, what does your opponent's Supreme Verdict situation look like? He probably doesn't want to Supreme Verdict away his own Ghost Council or Night Veil Spectre, but if you present, you know, every single juicy target in your deck right now, he might be tempted to do just that.
And the one thing about the Night Veil Spectre to remember, it's not just the exiling when it deals combat damage, which it does. It exiles top card of the player's library. You can play the cards exiled with the Spectre, and if 2/3 of the deck is in your colors, I mean, imagine getting a Sphinx's Revelation.
Oh, exactly. I mean, Spectre, you know, it's called a Spectre, which people normally think, oh, okay, well, this is going to make my opponent discard cards. You normally use it offensively. But this card really a lot more like an Ophidian, because even if you're not in the same colors, you start hitting their lands.
Right.
That will allow you to cast their spells in very short order.
Sure.
Sure, Gabe.
Enthusiastic. Nassif. All right, can't quite do that. He's got half the mana that he needs to pay that.
My turn?
Yeah, and then Nassif just like, okay, the writing's on the wall. Ghost Council can hit for 2. Night Veil Spectre can hit for 2. Nassif needs to resolve a Revelation right now, or at the very least get a flying blocker so that he doesn't die on the literal next turn of the game. And that's going to be hard to do through Mihara's Psychic Strike. I mean, it would give Nassif a elemental token, but that only matters so much.
18, yeah.
He's cracking Mihara down to 18, but Nassif really needs to produce something in a hurry. He's arranging his mana deliberately. He has at least some sort of plan.
Verdict.
Yeah, okay. So he's going to Verdict away a lot of creatures so that when Ghost Council comes back into play, it can take Nassif to 1, but it can't quite kill him. That said, Nassif needs to produce some threats right now because he's got to assume Mihara has some sort of removal in his hands.
Yeah, I mean, this doesn't look as good with Mihara having a grip full of cards. Mihara, I'll remind you, is up 1 game in this match. So Gabe Nassif really has got his back up against it.
Yeah, and these fars and away right here just going to put this game away.
Far and away, if it does not get countered, that is the game.
Now we do, Nassif has a lot of counter spells right here, so I mean, we are going to be able to fight this fight.
Or not.
Yeah.
There's the handshake. Gabe and Nassif goes down to Makihito Mihara in round 14 action here at Pro Tour Dragon's Maze. Again, that puts Mihara into the 11-3 bracket, probably knocks Gabe out for top 8 contention, certainly still in for top 16. Ultra Pro is the leading manufacturer of trading card game sleeves and deck boxes. If you're looking for official Dragon's Maze portfolios, card storage boxes, deck boxes, sleeves, and playmats, Ultra Pro has you covered. For more information, visit wizards.com/magicmerchandise. We still have matches going on the back tables. We're going to see which ones we're going to move to here in short order. I like both of these, both of the Tesa and the Tajik sleeves. I really like both of those.
I think that Tesa art is one of the best pieces of art that's been created in years. There's something captivating about it and really sort of austere, I think, about that piece.
She's giving you the stare down. It's like, do not attack me.
Yeah, not someone I want to mess with. I might get turned into a spirit.
All right, it looks like Sharfman Castellan is the only game we have going.
Yep.
And I'm going to try and dig up those deck lists as soon as I can find them.
Okay, well, we know that Rob Castellan is playing the homebrew.
Good cards that beat up on control decks. Deck.
Go.
Yeah, okay, here we go.
And what is David Sharfman playing?
Sharpman is on what looks like to be, Naya Aggro. It's the deck we see a lot of the Florida guys playing. Chris Fennell did a deck tech on it. Yeah, I think they call it San Diego Zoo.
Very clever. There's the overhead shot, and you can see quite a few guys in play for David Sharfman, and just a few for Rob Castellan. But Rob is getting in with the Beetle and with the Alms Beast.
Could gain quite a bit of life this turn if you're Sharfman. I love the Alms Beast technology. You know, Hunted Wumpus was a card we saw for years against opponents who we expected to be comparatively creature light or whose creatures wouldn't compare to Wumpus. Alms Beast doesn't have that drawback. It basically just says, I'm going to present a 6/6.
So I'm going to gain, if I was blocking with this and you had nothing, I would gain 10 life and I would take 5.
Right, so you're all life total adjustments happen at the same time.
Okay, we see the life totals there. Castellan's at 24, Sharfman's at 1.
2, 3, 4, 5, 6.
So he's going to block
power
with 10 power worth of guys,
blocking.
which means he's going to gain all of this and then only take 5 at the end of it.
You know, a really interesting thing here is that if Castellan had just a way to kill his own Alms Beast, Sharfman would just be dead based on these blocks. I don't know how frequently that comes up with Castellan's deck, but instead he's just going to use an Abrupt Decay on Sharfman's board and just blow out all of his creatures. Okay. Well.
Damage.
Yep, and that's the game.
Yep.
Rob Castellan extends the hand, and he goes into the 13-1 bracket. Very exciting play. Very deep rules knowledge play on Rob Castellan's part right there. Okay, we're back in the booth. I'm Sheldon Menery. He's Zach Hill, and we have brought you round 14 coverage from Pro Tour Dragon's Maze here in San Diego. That was something.
Yeah, I mean, just to make sure we understand on a literal level what happened there, by using those 2 removal spells on the creatures blocking Alms Beast, that prevented those creatures from dealing their lifelink combat damage, meaning the damage from the Voice of Resurgence and his other blocker was not enough to mitigate the attack from Deadbridge Goliath.
Right, because you gain, with lifelink now, used to be a triggered ability, and you would die in that scenario. The lifelink triggered ability, the lifelink ability gives you the life right away, which means you're going to theoretically live through the attack. If there's no removal there, Sharkman gains 10, then loses 5 basically at the same time. So he's still going to go to 6. But like you said, those 2 Abrupt Decays, taking up 2 of the smaller guys, the trample damage comes through, and the other unblocked creature comes through. game over.
Exactly. And I mean, that's another really big advantage, I think, to Castellan's deck is just that, like, you haven't played against any of these cards, right? I haven't sat and, you know, while preparing for this tournament and play tested against, what was that card? Alms Beast.
Alms Beast.
Plus Sire of Insanity, plus Golgari Charm, plus Celestia Charm.
Plus Deathbridge Chant.
Plus Deathbridge Chant. Yeah, right,
Don't
exactly.
forget
So, you know.
about the Deathbridge Chant. Okay, that's going to be all for us from the booth here in round 14. I'm Sheldon Menery. He's Zach Hill. Zach will be back with Rashad Miller for the play-by-play of next round. But right now, let's go to the news desk.
Hey everybody, welcome back to the news desk. Marshall Sutcliffe here, and what we're going to be doing is I'm going to throw that over to Rich at the wall. We've got a whole lot of new things that have shown up here at the last minute. He's working out every last number for you, and he's going to run down what the situation looks as we wind down to the top 8. Rich, what's going on?
So much going on the big board behind me. We are really closing in on the big one. 14 rounds just about closing out. You can see in the background just a couple of minutes left in the round. So let's take you up onto the big board and show you what is going on. So let's begin with the USA. Craig Wescoe there. He is a winner this round. 13-1 at the expense of Andrew Shrout. That's going to go to 11-3 very, very shortly. So Wescoe well and truly in the top 8. Congratulations to him. As he pointed out to me earlier on, if he makes it in, which he now will, 3 California Pro Tour top 8s in succession. Ridiculous. Absolutely fantastic achievement. Now, Rob Castellan, you've just seen him, 13-1. He has just defeated David Schaffman. So he, again, that's 2 of your top 8 for sure. Wescoe and Castellan. Schaffman at 11-3, still absolutely destiny in his own hands with 2 rounds to go. Win, win, that should be fine. Andrew Shout, there we are, 11-3. Now, Gabriel Nassif, he has fallen to 10-4, and the reason for that is he was in a tumultuous clash, as BDM said. It's a rerun from 2006, the World Championship top 8 against Makihito Mihara. It always seems, I stand here at Pro Tours with you, and Mihara is somewhere on the board. Last Pro Tour, he was somewhere over here, just really clinging on into the last rounds. But this time, Mihara is on the left of screen. That's where you want him to be if you're a fan of the 2006 World Champion, because at 11-3, he's in with a real shout of making it in. Again, he controls his own destiny. Win, win, see you tomorrow, Makihito Mihara. Now, Christian Fair, he has not won this round. He lost, goes to 10-4. So who beat him? Let's take a look. It's on the other side of the board, and it's Brian Kibler here. Kibler wins, and he goes to 11-3. Just take a look. Over we go. There it is. 11-3 for Brian Kibler for you. Again, now he is in with a shout of Player of the Year, remember. Reed Duke, he was 1. Brian Kibler 2. Josh Otter-Layton 3. They're all chasing Yuya Watanabe, who can't now make the top 8. So Kibler is a winner. Let's see what else we've got in store for you. Reed Duke, we now know, is at 10-4. So he now will be into the last chance saloon, hoping for a bit of tie-break action. He's kind of somewhere in the middle, tie-breaks wise, if memory serves. Now, Dusty Ochoa, he is a winner this round. He defeated Robert Jerkovic, which is why Jerkovic is now off our big board. Jerkovic, it looks like, remember, he was 6-0, faced Bob Marr, and they both kind of collapsed a little bit from there. Got to 6-2-1, 6-3-1. Jerkovic clinging on, but that was a big loss for him. Ochoa very much in the running. Josh Utter-Layton, a contender for Player of the Year. He's 11-3. He knows that if he can scrape one more win in the next round and then maybe ID to get into the top 8, the Player of the Year will be live going into tomorrow. He also knows that if he can come back tomorrow, almost certainly that will be enough to leapfrog him over everyone else, although Brian Kibler may have something to say about that tomorrow, for the World Magic Cup national champion for US, always one of the red-hot favorites in that event. And who wouldn't be with someone like Josh Utter-Layton or Brian Kibler or Ben Stark as their team leader. Matej Zatelkai, don't have his result in. Not a surprise, he's playing Esper Control, so maybe he's in an Esper Control mirror. Aetherlings all over the board, hard counters, proper counterspell action. Men's Magic. That's what we like from Matej Zatlkai. He's 10-3. Orin Swift, 10-4. Stephen Mann, he made the top 8 last time round, remember, at Montreal. His first Pro Tour top 8 at Gatecrash. He's still in the mix, but that 4th loss, dangerous, dangerous times. Oliver Polat-Rotman, he's been right in the mix all the way through. He's at 10-4. Absolutely fantastic effort. And then Brian Kibler, 11-3. Michael Burnett is now 11-3. I'm getting something in my ear. What have you got for me? Up at the time, Matej Zatlkai result coming in. What happened to him? He wins. Okay, there we go. It goes to 11-3. So Matej right in the mix. Lead European commentator, the runner-up from Pro Tour Berlin 2008. He has a shot at it. So the big news, Player of the Year, live. Rookie of the Year, well, that's really interesting because we said at the start, players coming in, Felipe Tapia Becerra of Chile, 20 points. Matteo Vasari, 18. He's now gone. Joe Demestrio came in at 17 on the back of second place at GP Portland last week. He's still in the mix. But who could be favourite for Rookie of the Year? It's Rob Castellan, because he just come in and off he goes, wins a PTQ, and here he is, 13-1. Marshall, that's where we are, closing in on the end of round 14. Follow that, my friend.
I don't know if I can. So much information. It's all coming so quickly. I'm really glad we have somebody like Rich here to decipher it for us. Now, there's still a few more outstanding matches. What we're going to do right now is we're going to bring you a deck tech with one of the guys that he just talked about who is already going to be in this top 8, Craig Wescoe. Let's see that right now.
Hi, welcome to the Tournament Center. I'm Zach Hill here with Craig Wescoe. We're going to take a look at Craig's draft on day 2. Now, can you tell us a little bit, Craig, about the deck that you drafted today?
Well, it was a black-red aggressive deck. Not typically the sort of draft that I go, but you know, that's what was open, and I just decided I'm going to take the deck that's being passed to me.
It's some good discipline, not always forcing the white decks.
You know, I'm not a big fan of draft because I can't just always play white, but you know, you got to do what you got to do.
Very unfortunate. All right, so let's take a look actually at how those packs came to be and how Craig tried to draft that deck. So we're taking a look at the first pack right here. You know, a lot of cards. I see some okay white cards, but Premier stuff in other colors. Tell us, what are you thinking about when you take a look at this pack?
Well, I'm thinking about what the person to my left is going to take after I take Ixaba.
All right, so this is the card that you took right here.
Right.
Okay, so given that, walk us through your thought process.
Okay, so the uncommons, there are a few. There's the Druid. I'm sorry, that's a common. This is one of the best commons.
Okay.
So that's a real good card to take. And also, let's see what was in here. So I was really thinking about, there was a removal spell, the Fatal Fumes.
I noticed Beetle Form Mage right here, a card that a lot of people really like.
Hi everybody, this is Brian David Marshall coming to you from the Tournament Center here at Pro Tour Dragon's Maze in San Diego. I am here with none other than Craig Wescoe, and we're about to talk about, well, a deck that we often talk about when we're talking to Craig Wescoe, which is a white weenie deck that has carried you to a 9-1 record thus far in the tournament. It's easy to just sort of go, oh, it's Craig Wescoe and he's playing a white weenie deck, but what That's is fair. It about, but there's got to be a reason that you've been so successful with the deck and that you keep coming back to the strategy when you're looking at a constructed format. What is the appeal for you?
Well, I like to put my opponent under pressure so that if they miss a beat or they're playing a control deck that has the wrong answers to the format, I can really punish them with a fast start. And then the other thing I like to do, which separates White Weenie from sort of red-green aggro and other sort of decks, is that I have a lot of utility. So I can play answers like Rootborn Defenses, Selesnya Charm, for the things my opponent's trying to do to stop my aggressive strategy.
And you find that that's something that's generally true of this archetype, that those answers to the answers are generally there in that archetype.
Yeah, that's sort of the way I've seen White go in development recently.
Right. So when I was talking to you about what led you to play this deck in our sort of pre-show, you said, well, this was the best path I could find to playing a White Weenie deck. So let's see the path you took and take a look at what we have to work with here. This is a lot of 1-drops, and
yeah.
I think the one that really stands out for me in the deck is Judge's Familiar, and you call the deck "Don't Judge Me."
Yeah, that was actually Alex West who came up with that.
So tell me about the Judge's Familiar.
Yeah, so the 1-drops, I wanted to put my Esper opponents under a lot of pressure, and so Experiment 1 is sort of the obvious one, right?
Right.
And which he can get as big as a 5/5 when I start playing Worms.
Right. Odd to say we're talking about a White Weenie deck and we lead with a green 1-drop, but
it's block. I didn't have a lot of options. Come on.
Small card pool, sure.
Right, and so Dryad Militant is the next one where he can evolve the Experiment 1. So I can start with Experiment 1, then play like another Experiment 1 and a Dryad Militant. Suddenly I have 3 2-power creatures.
Sure, on turn 2.
Now the thing that Judge's Familiar has done for me, in the green-white mirror matches, he allows me to get ahead in tempo even when I'm on the draw. So my opponent can't just cast Call the Conclave on turn 2, otherwise I'm trading my 1-drop for his 2-drop. And then when it comes to the advent of the worm, same problem. Are you going to cast that into a Judge's Familiar? I don't think so.
Awesome. And then what's going on with Civic Saber?
Oh man, I can't get away from Trusty Machete. Yeah, this we had 4 ofs for pretty much everything in the deck, and we only wanted 23 lands. So it was the question of what was going to be that 1 slot, and
Okay.
I was the one who convinced the rest of the team to play this.
Okay, so Civic Saber, equipped creature gets +1/+0 for each of its colors. So on a Dryad Militant, then you can attack for 4 on turn 2.
Yep.
With that, or you can be attacking for 3 on turn 2 with a Judge's Familiar.
Yeah, so that's exactly right. This allows Judge's Familiar to become basically a Lie of Sky Knight. And Dryad Militant can now attack into Loxodon Smiters and trade.
Oh, that's awesome. All right, so let's take a look at the next slide. And we see the 2-drops. Green, white, green, white, green, white, all Selesnya, Call of the Conclave. You already talked about this card a little bit from your opponents. What's this card doing for you?
Well, it allows me to start populating with cards like Trostani and the Green-White Guildmage in the sideboard. And it's also just a 3/3 Watch Wolf, for 2. So it fits curve, it evolves my Experiment 1 quickly.
Voice of Resurgence, obviously, you've expressed that you have some concern over cards like Supreme Verdict being played by your opponents.
Yeah, this helps to mitigate that concern.
How has this card, so this was the most hyped card coming into this tournament, probably.
I think I probably played a role in that hype as well.
I'm not casting any, throwing any stones here, but how has this played out? Has it lived up to the hype, yes or no?
I could not be happier with the card.
And he's 9-1.
It allows me to attack into Azorius Charm without worrying, which would otherwise be a really good card against all my tokens, because it just kills my token. And so if I have a voice in play, then they're basically just turning whatever's attacking into an elemental token.
Right, so you can play that attack.
Right, and it also, if they wrath me, then a lot of times the situation that comes up, I have an Experiment 1 with 2 counters on it, and I have a Voice of Resurgence. So the voice creates an elemental, I regenerate the Experiment 1, and now I just play a creature, and suddenly I have this 5-power board on.
Right, it's like you didn't even miss a beat.
Right, exactly. They need to verdict again.
Okay, and then you talked about the flexibility. And Selesnya Charm, 3 modes. You get to name which mode you're going to be in. What are the modes that you're picking?
Pretty much all of them, because +2/+2 trample allows me to break through in combat. So if I have a Loxodon Smiter and you have a worm, then I can attack into it.
Well, and also, again, we talked about this in another deck with someone. If your opponent has, say, an Aetherling that they're looking to block your guy and then blink it out, you can give it trample, and then you get full damage. It's like it was never blocked at all.
Yeah, and there's also scenarios where I kill an advent to the worm, so they try to flash a worm into play, and I'm just like, nope.
You can just shoot it before you even get the
Right.
blockers.
Exactly.
And then just a 2/2 white. Sometimes you just need a creature.
Yeah, the most common way I use the Make a Knight token is against a Supreme Verdict deck, so like Esper control. They wrath me, and I Rootborn defenses. But then if they don't wrath me, what am I going to do? I just wasted my turn. Let's make a knight. So then I'm still increasing my board without...
And then you still have the Rootborn defenses, and you have something to populate.
Exactly.
Okay, let's take a look at the next slide, and we'll see some of the cards we've been talking about. Loxodon and Smiter. Just, there's no, do we need an explanation?
I mean, I like elephants.
If you like elephants, you must love Advent of the Worm.
Yeah, he's big. The match where I played against Rob, I was populated with Tristani. I made, I think it was 10 worms, and was at like 73 life when I killed him. So that was fun.
Let's stop and take a moment to reflect on 10 worms and 73 life.
Yeah, I didn't really feel like I was playing White Weenie at that point, but...
And then Rootborn Defenses is a card you talked about. I was really wondering a lot about this card coming in. Supreme Verdict says it's uncounterable, but I don't believe them.
Yeah, when I'm on the play, this is the card that allows me to beat Verdict. If they're on the play, they usually have a turn to cast the Verdict, where
Right.
I have to apply another threat instead of this.
But if you're on the play, you're like, you come out of the gates with plays on the first couple turns, and then when they cast their Supreme Verdict tap out, you Rootborn Defenses. Maybe you even make another guy in the process, and that's yeah.
And it's also great in just creature stalemate, so I can just attack all my guys into their guys, and then just cast that, and I 3-for-1 them.
Sure. And so Temple Garden, Selesnya Guildgate, 9 forests and 9 plains. Your mana seems pretty evenly distributed.
Yep.
And then what else do we have here? And then just looking really quickly through the sideboard, we see Druid's Deliverance, Gift of Verzova, Glaring Spotlight. Let's keep moving on. Tristani, Selesnya's Voice. This is a card you've mentioned a couple times. Sounds like this card is doing filthy things, as is Vidugadi Guildmage. I've heard people talking about this as being just an excellent card against control decks where you get to just not interact with them and just make guys. Unflinching Courage, Shades of Brian Kibler in 2000. And I think is that the last of the cards? I don't think we have any more slides.
Yep.
But it's an exciting deck. And you're 9-1.
Yep.
And so you're playing with Team Luxurious Hair.
Yep.
You write for TCGplayer.com.
TCG player.
You've been talking about some of these cards. Perhaps if you've been reading his articles, you would have known all about Don't Judge Me. For Craig Wesco, this is Brian David Marshall signing off from the Tournament Center.